Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Carolina Weather Authority meteorologist Joshua Nagelberg, and we've got some more potential activity in the tropics that we need to talk about. First of all, those of you who responded to the last video, you were correct for the most part. It was Hurricane Dorian. We've updated our banner since then, but this is still Dorian hiding underneath our logo. And of course, we'll have more videos coming up here in the next couple of weeks as the tropics are taking a brief break, but not finished. So go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss out on those. We also have a Facebook page talking about the fall chill that's coming, as well as what's potentially going to happen in the tropics. And we've also got articles on CarolinaWXAuthority.com. We'll continue to post about the temperatures we're expecting coming up on into Friday and over the weekend. And beyond that as well, with our latest videos here, models, and long-range outlooks. All right, so let's talk about the tropics right now. The list has been very busy, 25 named storms, and the potential, we think, for a few more. Maybe even close to 30 storms before the season is out. I personally think we still have another hurricane or maybe two to come, and I'm going to talk about why that is. In fact, the next one that we've already started talking about could potentially be an East Coast threat. Way too soon to say exactly how much of a potential threat, but models are at least showing us some signs that that could happen based on where the high pressure systems are going to line up farther east than when they were over the last couple of months when all the storms went into the Gulf. So if you're in Florida and up the East Coast, including the Outer Banks and Carolinas, and if you're in the Bahamas, Cuba, and Jamaica, you need to keep at least a closer watch on things here with potential development maybe even as soon as a week from now in the Western Caribbean, somewhere in here, and then potentially a threat somewhere in this yellow window, which will probably change some more, seeing that we're still at least 10 days out from any threats to Cuba and on northward. But something we're going to be watching here very closely. All right, so let's take a look real quick here at what's going on right now, and currently fairly quiet across the tropics. We have one area of concern that is still possibly could get a quick name out of it here in the next day. It's not looking too healthy based on the wind shear it's facing, but something that could be impacting the islands here tomorrow with heavy rain and gusty winds, no matter if a circulation forms or not. But aside from that, we really don't have a whole lot going on to talk about. This is that tropical wave right now. It actually does have a little bit of a low-level circulation, but you'll see all this westerly wind shear. Now, the Gulf of Mexico is about as quiet as you're going to get. Same goes for the East Coast right now. This is going to be the area that we expect to pulse up here in about a week, where lower pressures could form, and a product of the pattern could be yet another gyre that forms another storm, kind of like what we saw a couple weeks ago with Gamma and then Delta. And the GFS model continues to show this. We're seeing some hints of it on the other models. I'm not going to say the GFS is going to be dead correct, but it's done a much better job than the European has in the pattern recognition here in the summer, which is not something you would have heard me say here a couple years ago, but in the year 2020, that's what we've seen. Is it going to be right? Again, that remains to be seen. It could be, or it could be grossly wrong. But at least we need to take a look at it because it's been more consistent than any of the other models. So currently, here's a close-up of our disturbance. This is 54 west. This is Barbados. The other islands are just off the map here. Pretty good thunderstorm development, but you can see strong westerlies are impacting it and keeping all the thunderstorms to the east of the center. So it very well may be close to depression strength right now, but the big question mark is, are these going to sustain themselves? And even if they do, with all this wind shear we're seeing, we may not have a survivable storm. Let's take a look at the visible, and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about with that circulation. You see it right about here. Notice all the western side of the storm being exposed. These very fast westerlies are getting into it. You also have some southerlies. So you have wind shear coming from both sides here, the south and the west. And the reason we're seeing all the thunderstorms on the eastern side of the circulation is because of that low-level wind shear and mid-level wind shear. You can see the low-level clouds here coming in out of the south-southeast, and mid-level clouds streaming in quickly from the west. And both of those do not bode well for a storm to survive. And in October, that's nothing unusual as well. The middle of October, we start to see these waves that come across start to get sheared up more and more. So the likelihood of us seeing a low-latitude tropical system coming off the Cape Verdes that survives the entire time is pretty low at this point. It's once these systems get into the Caribbean or into the Western Atlantic or the Southern Gulf, do they have a better shot at surviving? And a lot of that has to do with climatology. the available warm water, and you're seeing it right here, the amount of wind shear and the moisture in the air. So models, assuming it survives, do take it over the Leeward Islands and towards Puerto Rico and maybe across Hispaniola or just north approaching the Bahamas. But that's if this survives, and that is certainly still something we do not really see a lot of agreement on. One model, I think a couple days ago, tried to make this thing a tropical storm. Now the majority of the models show it pretty much at its peak intensity here over the next 12 hours with weakening to follow. So at the very worst, I think we're just talking about a depression or a very low-end storm. But more than likely, the Hurricane Center is not going to do anything about upgrading this based on that wind shear we're seeing. But surprises have happened. So regardless, it's going to be kind of rough here across the northern Windward Islands, the Leeward Islands, Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico over the next couple of days, because all those thunderstorm clouds are going to get spread to the west-northwest based on what we're seeing here. And again, if it survives and it's north of Haiti, it's unlikely to get into the Gulf. I know I'm seeing a couple of the Canadian ensembles showing that. They haven't been very consistent or very reliable this year. The majority of the systems that do develop it, the majority of those ensemble members do take the system north and then northeast. So in Bermuda, we're going to have to watch it, but I think in the southeast, I would probably bet that we're in okay shape at this point. Now the next system, on the other hand, is something we're going to keep an eye on, and it hasn't even formed yet. We've probably got another week before that happens. Let's look at the ensembles from the European model, and you can see really nothing survives in here in the next 5 days. It just doesn't track anything. Now the European, let's just say, hasn't been the best model this year. It does have a larger subtropical system forming near the Azores. This is a non-tropical system through New England here in the next couple of days. But you can see, I think one model member does try to bring it up east of the Outer Banks and east of 70 West and makes it a hurricane, while the other ensemble members do not show anything like that happening. However, when we get a little bit farther on, notice what's potentially forming down here could track up northward toward Cuba. This would be around the 25th of October. And then we see a few more solutions that show maybe the Bahamas or Florida getting threatened by a potential tropical system. Before then, I don't think we're seeing anything threatening, because notice this one ensemble member makes a hard right, and the upper level pattern supports that. So the next system we'll have to keep an eye on would be down in the Caribbean. And let me show that to you guys here real quick. You can see here nothing really forming until we get to about the 20th or early on the 21st. So about a week from now, we'll be keeping an eye down here north of Panama, east of Nicaragua, maybe near Honduras. Very close to an area where some of our stronger storms on record have formed. Storms like Mitch, storms like Sandy, storms like Hazel, Matthew. All these storms were products of the Western Caribbean. So the fact that we're going to see right now some sinking air there, keeping things at bay, we'll have a pulse where the MJO supports, that's Madden-Julian Oscillation supports rising air. And much like we saw a couple weeks ago, we could see a pretty quick development in here based on what we're seeing right now with the amount of heat content. It's pretty darn high west of Jamaica. You can see it dropped off a little bit here, but still could support a hurricane. This is, by the way, when Gamma and Delta came by, and you're still looking at a ton of heat content. So those storms, while they churned up a lot of that water, they weren't extremely massive storms, and the history could repeat itself. We could have another system somewhere in here. If it tracks closer to Jamaica or central Cuba, it's got a prime spot to develop, assuming that the wind shear is low. So we're making a few assumptions here, but notice the water temperatures still support hurricanes in this region and here. In the Gulf, it's cooled off, so a little bit less likely we see a strong storm. So that's something that we'll be watching. The upper level pattern shows high pressure over the western Gulf, which is great news for Louisiana. No storms will be impacting you there. You can see, though, this upper level tut in here, which is producing the westerlies and then the southerlies across our wave, which is in here. And as long as this area is here and you don't have something like this here, it's going to be tough to get this system here to develop. Strong trough going to be moving across the eastern U.S. We've got a block that'll set up over eastern Canada and Newfoundland, and that block is going to allow much cooler weather to drop south this week into the central U.S. and then make its way to the eastern seaboard over the weekend. And the Great Lakes could see snowflakes here as we get into the weekend. So starting to feel like fall, but this high pressure ridge could be building back in, so that cool air could just be temporary for maybe a 10-day stretch. So let's look at the models, because this is what I want to show you guys. We've been watching the Global Ensemble Forecast System for potential spots where development could occur, maybe west of Jamaica or southwest of Jamaica. And now we start to see a few solutions around the 21st and 22nd coming up into the northern Caribbean and maybe even across Cuba into the Bahamas. The Gulf does not look like a prime spot unless you're talking about the southwest coast of Florida. So we could have potential trouble all the way up the eastern seaboard here at the end of next week. And then many solutions are, the faster ones are more of a threat potentially to the east coast, while the slower ones are more of a threat to the Bahamas. But we have one solution here with a Category 5 hurricane. That's just one solution. Others with anywhere from a tropical storm to a Category 2 or 3 coming up the eastern seaboard. And, other models, if there's other ensembles, are slower. So this could get drawn out at least a week before we know what's going to happen. We could have a faster solution that zips up the coast, or a slower solution that could be a bigger problem for Florida and areas of the mid-Atlantic states, and maybe even New England as well. That's on the ensemble. Let's take a look here at the GFS, and we've seen some runs bring this over western Cuba and towards southwest Florida, and then pushing out to sea. The latest run from this morning shows that development coming through southeastern Cuba next weekend, and then tracking offshore, but it doesn't move toward Bermuda. It actually goes between the east coast and Bermuda, and this could be an issue for the Outer Banks. I mean, it's not right on top of them, but notice the high pressure region here, and we've got a building high in here. It's not going to just zip eastward, let's just put it that way. It's more likely to come up the coast, and then eventually we'll have to see where the next system is, because if this low is where it is in the Great Lakes, then this gets pushed out to sea. But if this low drops down into here, then it is not out to sea. So too soon to say right now if there's any threat to the northeast, but we'll have to watch and see where this next trough shapes up, because if this ends up being slower and buried to the west, then we've got maybe bigger problems, kind of like you saw during Sandy. Now the parallel, GFS parallel, which is going to be the future GFS, and this model showed, the gyre a couple weeks ago sending 2 storms into Florida, but it underestimated the ridge, the high pressure ridge, ended up being into the central Gulf states. It is not showing that this time. It's got a huge high pressure region, though, over the eastern U.S. early next week, and then a weak system dropping through eastern Canada. That will keep things buried through about the 22nd, but here comes the 24th, so the beginning of next weekend, and a powerful hurricane coming up through the middle of Cuba and right over the northwest Bahamas, the same areas that got hit by Dorian last year. This is a 940 millibar Category 4 hurricane going right through the northwest Bahamas and then threatening the Outer Banks. And the difference between this run and the one I just showed you with the operational GFS is the location of this next system, because this model run is stronger with the high pressure region here. It brings this low farther down, drops it southward, and that could scoop up this system and bring it up the east coast. Too soon to say if that's absolutely going to happen, but this run showing it. It's got a Long Island hit and what could be sort of like a Sandy or a Gloria if that were to work out. Not saying it will, but we've seen some powerful storms around this time of the year. This is Wilma. Notice the difference here is that Wilma came to the Yucatan and then got scooped up by a trough and accelerated through South Florida and offshore. But that's because we had a big trough all the way over here. Notice the model I just showed you has it a little bit farther to the north and west. And then you have an issue like potentially a Sandy, which the trough actually dropped down into here, scooped the system up, and brought it back to the west. A very rare track, but one that could occur if this next trough drops all the way down into here. But more than likely, it's going to be more up into here, and that will keep the storm parallel to the coast or push it out. So definitely something we're going to have to watch here for sure. But yeah, this was the upper level pattern during Sandy, and this trough here ended up intensifying and scooping up the system and pulling it back in because of a stronger high pressure ridge here. So that is certainly something on the table, whereas with Wilma, we had a trough back in here, and that was more progressive and pushed everything eastward. So if the GFS is showing run after run after run of a hurricane, then at least it's got my attention. The other thing I'll show you guys is the ensembles showing this cool air coming down next weekend into next week. And then notice where the warmth is offshore. So the area in between the cool and the warm is where potential tracks could go, right along this line. So that's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on here. It would be during the last week of October and probably out of the area by Halloween. So that's what we're looking at, folks. Of course, we will have more on this coming in the next several days. It's a large swath because it's just too far out at this point to make any call. But make sure that you are watching our videos because this will change. So subscribe here and we'll keep you guys posted. All right, everyone, have a great day and God bless.